Coming up on Arirang News, the South Korean government is setting up a committee dedicated to addressing the problems of young people who are having a hard time finding work and coping with rising living costs. The U.S. Federal Reserve, as expected, keeps its benchmark interest rate unchanged, citing strength in the American economy. President Trump had wanted a big cut, but didn't get it. And the top financial authorities of South Korea, China, and Japan reaffirmed their commitment to resisting protectionism. In a three-way meeting, they agreed to pursue mutual, rule-based trade and investment. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning into our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. Korea's youth are struggling with a range of challenges that are becoming a real social issue. Things like getting a job, finding a partner, and starting a family. Now the government is going to form a committee to try and find ways to address these challenges through policy. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
The South Korean government will establish a committee under the Prime Minister's office to overlook youth-related policies. The decision was reached during a meeting on Thursday between the ruling Democratic Party, the government, and the presidential office. As legislation is required before the committee's establishment, a government task force will be put together beforehand.
When the committee is established, we'll be handling overall youth-related policies. On top of dealing with employment, we'll be able to tackle a wide range of issues related to young people, like education, welfare, marriage, and the lower birth rate.
The presidential office and ruling party will also be making individual efforts by creating separate affiliated bodies solely dedicated to working on youth-related matters. The ruling party also vowed to swiftly pass related laws by seeking cooperation from the opposition bloc, as well as boost next year's budget to deal with youth-related issues.
We will be taking long-term efforts to ease the burden on young people. We will meet with young people to find appropriate solutions.
Conditions haven't been the most favorable for the country's young people, weighed down in part by a slowing economy and aging population. The youth jobless rate was at 10.8% in March, but a broader figure hovers at around 25%, the highest since relevant data was first compiled in 2015. That figure takes into account people that have given up on looking for work, as well as part-time workers. On top of that, rising living costs and worsening income polarization are also a burden for the average youth.
We will join efforts to systematically deal with the issues and come up with policies that meet young people's standards.
The three sides acknowledge that despite efforts until now, they've been unable to properly address youth-related issues, and the policies have been devised by the older generations. They vow to boost communication and encourage participation among young people when drawing up policies, as they know their own problems the best. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in held a meeting Thursday with around a dozen elders to seek their advice on state affairs. Over a working lunch at the Blue House, they discussed a range of issues, including government reform, employment, and ways to strengthen the social safety net. Attendees included a former prime minister, a former head of the National Intelligence Service, as well as ex-ministers, judicial officers, and professors. Some of them come from the conservative side, so there may also have been some criticism of the government's policies. A similar meeting was held last month, to which the president invited former economic officials to seek advice on policy in that field. Talks between North Korea and the U.S. have been stalled since the Hanoi summit in February broke down. But top U.S. officials continue to stress that diplomacy is the key to North Korea's denuclearization. Kim Yo-sun reports.
Acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan pointed to diplomacy as the primary way to get North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. In his testimony before the U.S. House of Representatives Appropriations Committee on Wednesday, Shanahan added the Pentagon continues to generate readiness in case diplomacy fails. He also stressed that North's denuclearization is his department's most pressing goal, which reaffirms that the Pentagon will continue to support dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has reiterated that Washington is ready to resume dialogue with the North, adding he's hopeful about the regime's denuclearization process. In an interview with Fox News on Tuesday, the top U.S. diplomat said there's only one real approach to denuclearization, and that is to do it right and to begin to reduce the threat. Such remarks come as the North's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee called on Washington late last month to change its current way of calculation and re-establish its stance. In the aftermath of the Hanoi summit in late February, Pyongyang has criticized top American officials, including Pompeo, through its state media, blaming them for leading talks into a dead end. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul and Washington are in the final stages of organizing a trip to South Korea next week by the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun. Local media cite diplomatic sources saying Biegun's first trip to Seoul since the Hanoi summit is set for May 8th through the 10th. In Seoul, he's expected to meet with his South Korean counterpart, Lee Do-hun, and should all go as planned, next week's meeting will be the first working group meeting between the allies in about 2 months. The two sides also plan to discuss the delay in South Korea's humanitarian aid to the north. In music, the South Korean superstars BTS have won yet another accolade. On Wednesday in Las Vegas, they became the first Korean artist to win 2 trophies at the Billboard Music Awards. Those were in the categories of Top Social Artist and Top Duo or Group. It's the band's 3rd time in a row winning Top Social Artist, but their first time winning Top Duo or Group, which is a category not based on votes from fans. At the show, BTS performed their smash hit single Boy with Love. The U.S. Federal Reserve has decided to keep interest rates where they are, despite calls from President Trump to cut them. The Fed sees healthy growth in the U.S. economy, so it's a move that signals patience. Kim Dami reports.
Chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve Jerome Powell announced that the central bank will keep its benchmark rate in the range of 2.25% to 2.5%, unchanged since March. The Federal Open Market Committee explained that the labor market is strong and that economic activities continue to rise at a solid rate.
All I can see is that we have an economy where the expansion is continuing, growth is at a healthy level, the labor market is strong, we see job creation, we see wages moving up, inflation is low, which gives us the ability to be patient, and we do expect it to move up, and we want it to move up to 2%. So I see us on a good path for this year.
The Fed acknowledged both overall and core inflation have declined and are running below the central bank's 2% target. The chairman also added that there was a slowdown in household spending and business investment in the first quarter, noting that the basis for a healthy economy is consumer spending and business investment. Earlier on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted that the Fed should reduce rates by 1% to help the U.S. economy go up like a rocket. While the Wall Street Journal reported that the key officials of the Fed are reviewing conditions of the benchmark rate, the Fed chief said for now, low inflation allows the central bank to be patient in deciding on any further changes to its overnight benchmark lending rate. The head of Bank of Korea, Lee Ju-yeol, commented that the Fed's decision was in line with expectations and also hinted no rate hikes or cuts anytime soon. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
As of Thursday, South Korea is no longer exempt from the U.S. sanctions on oil from Iran. Late last month, Secretary of State Pompeo announced that there would be no extensions of the waivers granted to 8 main buyers of Iranian oil, including South Korea and Japan. Washington's toughest ever sanctions on Tehran come after the U.S. withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran in May last year. This will take a toll to some degree on South Korea's petrochemical industry, which imports 80% of its condensate, or ultra-light oil, from Iran and Qatar. It's time now for a look at the market action here in Korea and around the world. And for that, we're joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Kiwoom Securities. Mr. Yu, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So we heard just now that the Fed kept interest rates where they are, not seeing a need right now for a shift in policy. What was the reasoning at the Fed, and how have the markets reacted?
Well, clearly the market was down because of the news that the Fed is not going to lower interest rate anytime soon. I think we need to look at some of the inflation numbers first. If you look at the current inflation rate, it's only about 1.9% below the Fed's target. And also the core personal consumption expenditure price index was up only 1.6%, much lower than 2% target. This was the reason why the market was expecting maybe the Fed might think about in the future lowering the interest rates. However, though, because of the Q-on-Q numbers of the economic growth rates were coming in very strongly in the first quarter, the overall growth rate was coming in at 3.2% year on year. So that's why the Powell said that current inflationary pressure being low is only a transitionary. So because they're worried about a little bit of the inflation might be picking up because of the stronger economic growth rates. That's the reason why right after the announcement, U.S. dollar strengthened. Rate rose from 10%. 10 years rate rose from 2.44 to 2.5%, and also market shows somewhat of corrections. I think we need some additional catalyst for market to go up for U.S. The things that we are looking for is still, number one, the rate cuts, and the number two is the China-U.S. trade negotiation settlement, and the third would be the OECD economic leading indicator turning around soon.
Well, here in Korea, the Kospi started out a little weak this morning, but shot right up in the early hours. Now, what was behind that? Was the Fed decision at all related, or if not, what was?
Yes, it's not necessarily the Fed. I mean, if the Fed decision was making an impact, then the market should have gotten down. But you've seen that the Korea's probably economic numbers being the worst in the first quarter, and the numbers are picking up a little bit after the worst quarter is over. As you heard, for that, the GDP was falling in the first quarter Q-on-Q by 0.3% versus the consensus of 0.3% rise. However, though, we are seeing going into the April, Korea's business confidence index was rising from 73 to 75, and also the industrial productions were picking up to 1.1% growth rate, and the retail sales were up also 3.3%. And also the biggest concern was the sharp decline of the facility investment, over 10%, but that turned around quite sharply to 10% growth. Also, the export numbers were coming in at 2% decline, which is less than 5% decline expectations. Furthermore, people are thinking about the DRAM prices might be picking up in the second half of this year. So all being said, because of the cheapest market being the Kospi, and some of the economic numbers are turning around, people are expecting that Korea might do much better than what they've done in the last few months.
Got it. Well, also this year we've seen the Korean won weakening against the dollar in a pretty big way. But today that turned around slightly. What's happening with the exchange rate now? Right.
The exchange rate is kind of stabilizing somewhat. It has sharply risen to 1168 won to dollar, which is a almost 4% rise from several months ago. This kind of sharp rise is all about related to the economic growth rate. Everybody been worried about the economic growth rate slowing down. And also because of that, there is a chance of the rate cut coming in by the BOK. People are talking about third quarter rate cuts. Also, because of the Korea's export skewedness, falling exchange rate is definitely good for exporters. And there's been some rumors that the contract prices for SK Hynix and various other export companies were affected by the exchange rate that was set at the end of April. So that's why the recent rise of the currency in terms of the depreciation has been happening. But today, as you said, it has gone down slightly to 1164 level. In the long run, we think that one should appreciate over the period of time, given that Korea continues to generate trade surpluses, and also the fiscal deficit numbers are very timid. So all being said, won appreciation should gradually happen in the future.
All right, Mr. Yu, that's where we're going to have to leave it today, though. Thanks for your analysis, as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, South Korea's foreign minister will tour major conglomerates in the country over the next 2 months. The government is shifting its focus from small and medium-sized businesses to large corporations in the hopes of encouraging them to expand investment. Our Cha Sang-mi has the details.
In line with the government's efforts to boost the nation's economy, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi will tour conglomerates over the next 2 months to drum up support for government policy. Speaking to reporters on the sidelines of the 22nd ASEAN Plus 3 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting Thursday, Hong said conglomerates should expand investment to overcome the economic woes at hand. Hong said the government's focus will shift from small and medium-sized businesses to large corporations. The minister's remarks come after data released by the central bank last week showed the lowest ever quarterly gross domestic product since the 2008 financial crisis. As for trade, Hong expressed concern that Korean-made cars could become the target of U.S. import tariffs. He said he has delivered these concerns and the ministry is looking into ways to address any emergencies. His comments follow a meeting between the finance ministers and central bank governors of South Korea, China, and Japan, during which they reaffirmed their commitment to resist all forms of trade protectionism. At their 19th trilateral meeting in Fiji on Thursday, the financial authorities discussed upholding an open and rule-based multilateral trade and investment system, as well as accelerating intra-regional trade and investment activities. The three sides also agreed to further improve communication and coordination to contribute to strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth. The 20th meeting will take place in Incheon, South Korea next May. 차상미, Arirang News.
The latest round of trade talks between the U.S. and China wrapped up in Beijing on Wednesday. Reports say the Trump administration, wanting to get a deal, has dropped or watered down a key demand that China stop breaking into America's commercial computer networks. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. and China appear to be getting closer to ending their long trade war, which has cost both sides billions of dollars, disrupted supply chains, and roiled financial markets. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, after concluding Wednesday's round of talks in Beijing, took to Twitter to call the meetings productive. The two countries will continue their high-level trade talks next week in Washington. Both Washington and Beijing have noted progress on issues which include intellectual property and forced technology transfer to help end the conflict that has been marked by tit-for-tat tariffs. Despite the White House ramping up pressure to reach a deal, even warning that the U.S. is prepared to walk away from the negotiations, the Financial Times reports that President Trump has dropped a central demand that China halt alleged instances of commercial cyber theft. The report, citing several people briefed on the matter, added that Trump has softened his administration's opening negotiating position. However, there's still much to be discussed between the economic powerhouses, as U.S. officials have noted an enforcement mechanism for a deal and timelines for lifting tariffs are sticking points. China has also acknowledged that it views the enforcement mechanism as crucial, but says it must work both ways and cannot only put restraints on Beijing. Watchers say the two sides are expected to reach a deal in mid-May, possibly setting up a summit between the leaders of the two countries. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Consumer prices in Korea rose a little more slowly last month, below 1% for a fourth month in a row. According to Statistics Korea, consumer prices rose just 0.6% in April from a year earlier. Pushing prices up were livestock and fisheries products, gaining 0.7%, but inflation was held down by declining prices of oil products and slower inflation in services. Services prices rose just 0.9%, the least since 1999. South Korea is planning to promote the creation of tangible content like virtual reality and augmented reality using the 5G wireless network. The Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution met on Thursday with experts in ICT and government agencies, including the Ministry of Science and ICT and the Ministry of Trade, to establish a long-term plan for that new technology. On the same day, the Science Ministry announced a plan to inject more than $25.7 million into tangible content and other areas, particularly to help venture companies and small and medium-sized businesses. Among the future growth engines designated by the committee are tangible content, smart factories, and autonomous vehicles. 5G wireless technology is expected to speed up the development of technologies like driverless cars and drones, and Korean companies are leading the way. Oh Soo-young has the final installment in our series on 5G.
Sometimes a split second makes all the difference between life and death. 400 times faster than the blink of an eye. The 5G wireless network is expected to propel the advancement of driverless vehicles and drones, which will inevitably affect public roads and safety. And researchers in Korea are producing some of the world's leading core technologies.
Localization technology helps unmanned and driverless vehicles communicate and determine how far apart they are. It can also be used to keep them within the lane. 5G makes this much faster and more efficient. Our technology pinpoints the location and reduces the margin of error by tens of centimeters to enable reliable autonomous driving.
AI mobility solutions developed by local firms can improve safety by scanning whether the driver is tired or distracted, as well as detecting road conditions and traffic lights and steering the car when needed. Drones, meanwhile, are already being deployed to industrial and emergency situations, combined with real-time video streaming and AI to track and analyze their surroundings. Features like facial recognition could later help identify and rescue victims, as well as send their status and medical information to health authorities.
Our solution is being used by the police and other various authorities. With 5G, SK's video streaming and drone control will enable faster and more efficient responses due to low latency. Recently, Gangwon Fire Services told us that our solution was very useful when checking the scenes of the forest fire in Sokcho in real time.
SK plans to expand its high-performance live video streaming and monitoring for industrial drones used in agriculture, logistics and delivery services, partnering with drone maker DJI. Before 5G-based solutions become widely deployed, experts say it's crucial to iron out various safety and security issues.
We think around 1 million devices will be connected in the space of a kilometre, exchanging enormous amounts of data, including private information. Even the slightest breach or lapse could lead to colossal accidents, for driverless cars especially.
The South Korean government is aiming to resolve these concerns in order to nurture key sectors related to 5G and create a $158 billion market by 2026. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, there have been a string of fires across Korea over the past couple of years at factories making energy storage systems for power grids. The government's been investigating and says it'll reveal the results next month and lay out plans to prevent such fires in the future. From August 2017 through this January, there were 21 fires at facilities belonging to companies including Samsung SDI and LG Chem. The results of the investigation were supposed to come out in March, but there was trouble figuring out the main cause scientifically. The delay, though, is making it hard for the companies affected to win new orders. The South Korean government plans to toughen employment regulations to better protect young people working part-time jobs like food delivery. Also, more help for young people dealing with mental health and/or drug issues. Choi Si-young has this report.
Employment insurance for young people who deliver food for work will become mandatory. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family on Thursday revealed its plans to benefit young people working in food delivery services, after the latest government data shows some 500 adolescent delivery workers were injured or killed in traffic accidents in 2015. The ministry also plans to better monitor employers who have been reported for treating young workers unfairly, educate them, and help settle disputes. These measures come in response to last year's statistics by the ministry that show almost 40% of adolescent part-time workers said they were treated unfairly at work, a jump of 7% from 2 years earlier. The ministry is also planning to build a rehab center for young people dealing with mental health issues and boost efforts to help those with drug problems. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More updates coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.